Good morning and welcome again to the Senior Hour. I'm Barbara Cochran with my co-host, Dr. Jean Dorio, on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And we're speaking now with Mike Dougherty, and he's the Community Behavioral Health Unit representative. Is that correct?
That's good enough.
Okay,
Close.
Henry Mayo Hospital. Whoa, what a mouthful. I got my eye teeth twisted around my tongue.
That's all right. That's quite all right. That's quite all right. Gee, I was just with you folks.
You sure were.
I know.
And the last time you brought some very funny entries into the medical records for not at our hospital, but of course, but at others around the country that were a little bit humorous, especially relative to maybe even our seniors.
Yes, that's
right.
True.
And Barbara asked me to bring more the next
Yes,
time I showed up.
that's right.
And by the way, I have to let your listeners know that none of these were written by Dr. Dorio.
Okay,
At
very
least
good.
as far as we can tell.
That we will admit to.
There you go, as far as he will admit
Now,
to.
again, just to set this up, doctors chart on patients as they see them. And sometimes, as we all know, when we get in a bit of a hurry, we don't necessarily write down what we intended to write down.
Right.
And in the case of these, they sometimes turned out rather humorous. Here's the first one. On the second day, the knee was better. And on the third day, it disappeared.
That is a funny one.
Now, if you have children, you'll love this one. Patient has 2 teenage children, but no other abnormalities. Now, this doctor must have been treating a dragon, and you'll understand that comment in a minute. Here's the entry. Cough with flame.
Cough with flame.
Phlegm.
Yes, I know.
And Dr. Dorio, this must have been a pretty bad doctor. Listen to this. The patient has been depressed since she began seeing me in 1993.
Now that speaks volumes.
A little reflective there. Maybe too much.
And here's the last one. While in the ER, she was examined, X-rated, and sent home. We assume he meant
X-rayed.
Oh, man.
Well, keep collecting those.
Those
will
are fun, aren't
yeah,
they?
they are.
Those
They
are crazy.
really are. And it shows you how people can write and really not realize what they're writing because they don't go back over it.
Right.
You know.
And we all know if we write that when you write something and you go back and look at the sentence, you say, what did that mean?
But yeah,
What was I
exactly.
thinking about when I wrote that?
Or, wait a minute, you didn't spell that correctly. Where were you, you know?
And we all know that cough with flame, they meant phlegm, but it
That's
didn't come
right.
out that way.
Could
And
be
if
a
somebody
fire-
was reading it, you'd think, what?
Could be a fire hazard.
Pretty bad cough.
Well, the one with the patient has been depressed since she started seeing me, and that is really funny.
It is.
So with our elder senior patients, and we have a behavioral health unit at our hospital, and our seniors, as they're getting older, suffer. Not just physically, but mentally, and the hard part for all of us is to recognize that there's a component of depression that starts to set in, worry about life, confidence in life starting to fall, and things just, your health not as good, your diabetes getting out of control, or a new diagnosis, another layer of medication that you have to take. I mean, it's daunting, that the challenges that our seniors have to face, but when they come upon it, sometimes then when they're being reflective and not flaming at all, they end up getting worried at night, and some of that depression sets in. So what do we do? How do we recognize that, Mike? How do we assure that our seniors around us, and our patients, but our loved ones, our grandparents, how do we make sure that, if they're psychologically suffering, what do we do? How do we recognize that?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say how important it is to pay attention, because depression is a significant indicator of the potentiality for suicide.
That's right.
I mean, that's the end result of depression that goes untreated. And I have to say that September is actually Suicide Prevention Month.
That's right.
And I'm a member of the Suicide Prevention Committee here in town that's headed up by Larry Shallert over at COC. And the sheriff attends those meetings as well. And I have to tell you that, unfortunately, here in Santa Clarita, we have a huge amount of suicides that take place. Over the past 3 years, they have been way up. In fact, last year was considerably higher than the year before, and this year we started out double what we were the year before, which was already high. And unfortunately, the most of the suicides, not all by any stretch, but most of the suicides have been carried out by men aged 50 years and older.
Wow. But then we have to ask the question, why? And the things that impact especially our seniors, we mentioned the health problems, the medications, but there are family issues that start to develop, relationship problems that happen. You have a loved one that is not functioning as well. You become a caregiver, but you might lose your spouse. And there are financial situations that occur as well. You know, here you've retired and you have your nest egg, and then all of a sudden, you know, a medication might cost $30,000, and all of a sudden, whoosh, your nest egg is evaporating, and there's a threat that the way you're living, how you're living, is not going to be the way you might be able to live tomorrow. So all these things start to impact our seniors, and you know, how do we cope with that? How do we, like I said, how do we recognize that?
Well, one of the biggest things that people have to understand is that mental health is just as important as your physical health.
Absolutely.
And the two interact. So what happens in most cases, let's say that the senior has a family and they're nearby and they come to visit from time to time, if that family is probably looking for physical situations.
That's
in other
right.
words, how are you feeling? How is that hip doing? How is your cough? Those sorts of things. But they really need to pay a lot of attention to how the senior is responding to them. You know, are they beginning to say things like, "I just don't care. I'm tired. I'm done with it." You know, and then start giving away things. A lot of times people that are thinking about suicide will start giving away things that are actually precious to them. That's a clue. Another clue is actually what I just said. If they're stating that they're not interested in things anymore, let's say that the family goes over to the senior's house and they notice that her plants are not being cared for, and normally she would always be taking care of the plants. So there are things that you have to look at. And if you weren't looking for them, they probably would escape you. You
That's
don't
very
connect
true.
the dots right away because you're not thinking about that. But seniors' mental health is extremely important. And one of the other reasons that you need to do this is that most people think, if you ask people what group out there of all the groups in society would you think are the most suicidal, who commit the most suicides, most people will tell you college students.
Correct.
Because of all the pressure. That's actually not true. The biggest group that you have to watch for suicides is seniors. And in fact, the number one group are in their 80s.
Wow.
The number two group, I believe, starts off at 73 years of age. But it's because, just what you said, Dr. Dorio, anything from the loss of a spouse, which last time I was here I talked, they could say they might be depressed 3 or 4 months after the death of a spouse, but many of them are depressed a full year after and beyond.
That's right.
And so that plays into exactly what we're talking about. If you're a caregiver, that's something you need to watch for, not just the physical, but the mental as well, because if you're a senior, you're probably not going to be telling people, well, I'm feeling this way mentally. I'm starting to have these thoughts. They just don't do that.
They don't do it.
Because they think that being depressed is part of becoming older, but it isn't.
You're right, it isn't. It really isn't. Another thing to watch for is if that person sleeps too much, because that is an absolute indicator.
Sure is.
Because they don't want to stay awake.
No.
So
Or they're isolating themselves.
Yes,
That too.
are.
They're staying at home. They're not going
That's
out as
very
much
true.
or interacting as much.
They may be
not
losing-
answering the phone.
Losing
Not-
interest in food.
Not watching television, even
Right.
doing the usual activities that they usually do. They don't go to church, they don't take care of your pets. I mean, there's so many other things that just start to happen that those are the clues, Mike, aren't they?
They
That,
are.
And how often is it that we miss those clues?
Most of the time, actually.
Most of the time.
Because people just aren't thinking about that. I mean, if the senior coughs, they're asking, what is that? Has that been going on
How long
for
have
a
you
while?
had it? Is it flame?
But if the other things are taking place, they just don't catch them because we're not thinking about them.
Yeah, they're sometimes very subtle things that go on, like sleeping a lot. That's very subtle. You wouldn't even think about that. Most people wouldn't.
No.
But
They
it's a
really wouldn't.
conglomeration usually. Usually there's more than one clue.
That's
I
true.
mean, they don't just have one thing going on. I think as the depression escalates, then it gets to be more and more. And
Sure
if you're
does.
not picking those things up, then you're really going to miss the whole problem in the long run that's going to affect the individual, because we know, as you mentioned, the mental health then affects the physical health, and they'll start to deteriorate.
That's right. And there's also a two-edged sword there, because let's say you're going through some kind of a trial with a physical problem, and if you're depressed, if you have a mental health issue, it's going to take longer for you to recover from that, and it's going to be more expensive. So it's going to hit you in the pocketbook, and it's going to drag out because you're not mentally well.
And they lose hope.
That very much so. Yes.
And okay, so they get hospitalized. Physically, get them better. They're ready to leave the hospital, but you could tell sometimes by the look on their face, the way they're talking, that something is still a barrier to their life. And if there's time in the hospital, sometimes I think there is time as clinicians to be able to explore that a little bit more. And a lot of times they're willing, especially our seniors, are willing to talk about it. But when the doctor, the nurses, and everybody else doesn't have the time to give our patients, then it's going to materialize down the line as a problem.
Yeah. And they do. They come to a point where they say, I'm just tired of this. I know my mother did. She'd had to keep going back and forth to the doctor, and she came up with something. I don't remember exactly what it was. And I said, well, what did your doctor say about it? And she said, I haven't been to see the doctor. And I said, why haven't you been to see the doctor about that? And she said, I'm tired of going to see the doctor. I'm just going all the time, and I'm just tired of it. And it was something she should have done, but she didn't want to.
Yeah.
So I could see that happening very easily. But people want to be aware. And I need to say something here. September being Suicide Prevention Month, a lot of people think that if someone were to say flat out to them, I'm feeling suicidal, I'm feeling like I just want to end it all, I'm sick of this, they're terrified. The person that's hearing this is terrified. What do they do? What do they say? Because most people think that if they were to say something, that it would cause the person to commit suicide. That's actually very wrong. That's not going to happen. So there are things you can do. You can talk to them. You can call 911. And the thing to do is to listen. Don't be judgmental. If they say I'm going to kill myself, just stay calm and ask, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And then ask them, how? How are you going to do that? Why? Why would you do that?
Well, that's one of the things that we used to have out here was a 24-hour hotline. And I was one of the ones who started it many, many years ago. And we had listeners 24 hours. And you could listen from your home because they would plug you in, over a 24-hour period. And then many times at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd have someone on the line who was suicidal. And the training that the hotline listeners had is specifically learn how to listen. And our trainer used to role play with us. He was experienced in hotlines and was a certified trainer. And that's what we had to learn. We had to learn how to listen and how to respond appropriately. To sit back and relax and hear what they have to say and absorb it. and be prepared to follow through with whatever you needed to follow through with.
Because it's shocking. Most people are shocked if somebody says, I'm going to commit suicide, and you get the impression that they're serious about it. That's a shocking thing to hear.
It is.
And so what do you got caught off guard. What are you going to say? It's important to kind of know. There is, COC has a mental health first aid class that actually teaches you how to respond to somebody that's feeling suicidal, and I believe they do that actually free. But you can contact the Student Health and Wellness Center out there. Larry Shallard he runs that unit, or he helps head it up. There is also a 1-800 suicide hotline, and I hate to tell you this, but I don't have it with me, and if Larry Shallard is listening, he'll be very upset with me. But there is a 1-800 number that they can call, and it's available 24/7.
But the other side of the coin, we're not professionally trained. If we go to the first aid, mental health first aid class, we learn that. And Barbara, you learned it, but for the most part, we're not trained, from the material we might read. You're not going to just find it on the front page of the Signal. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So when you're worried about that, certainly 911 you can call. You can sit and you can listen. But ultimately, to inform the patient's physician and the nurse and the medical professionals around your loved one or the person you're talking to, that's important, that there's an outlet. You don't have to try to be the one to prevent things from happening and then know that, you could have some guilt from that and all that stuff. You don't have to go there. You can realize that, no, you don't have to wait to take a class and figure out what you're going to do. Go ahead and be prepared to let family members know, let the doctor and the medical professional people know. You need to remember that there's an outlet here, that you just don't have to stop and be worried and then be frazzled by it. Move forward with all this.
And we've been talking about healthcare workers or family members watching the seniors for this, but we can also say this to seniors. They get together with their friends.
Oh, yes.
What if you're with your friend doing whatever and you start noticing that they're acting this way or talking this way, or what if they say to you, I'm just tired of all this, I'm just thinking about killing myself, I'm going to commit suicide. What would you do? So the seniors need this as much as anybody else does.
Yes, they really do. And, you never know, because you may quite often see yourself in another senior who is relating this to you. You stop and think, well, wait a minute.
I've been there, done that.
Wait a minute. Yes. I'm feeling that same way many, many occasions.
And people tend to say, but how often are we going to come across this? I mean, this is never going to happen to me. I have to tell you, because I'm at Henry Mayo, I have to take CPR to be able to do resuscitation. I'm on the unit there. And my son had a cardiac arrest and fell to the floor in our house. And guess who had to do CPR? I had to do CPR on my son.
Whoa.
And so don't ever think that it can't happen. It can happen. And if it does happen, wouldn't you rather be prepared than not? I mean, what would I have done if I didn't know CPR? What would I have done?
Yeah.
Whoa, that is amazing. That is amazing. I think we need to take a break. I'm Barbara Cochran with my co-host, Dr. Jean Dorio, on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back to the Senior Hour. I'm Barbara Cochran with my co-host, Dr. Jean Dorio, on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And we're speaking with Mike Dougherty, who's involved with the Behavioral Health Unit at Henry Mayo Hospital. And we've been talking about seniors committing suicide and some of the things that we can look for
and prevent.
And September is Suicide Prevention Month, so it's a perfect time to talk about it. And now I have to give a thanks to the board operator, Cody. Thank you very much. He saved me. I didn't have the 1-800 number. He looked it up. Are you ready for this? Now, this is the Suicide Prevention Hotline. It's a national number. It's available 24/7. If you need to call them for any reason regarding somebody possibly saying to you that they're thinking about suicide, or even if you yourself are thinking about suicide, you need need somebody to talk to, here it is, 1-800-784-2433. I'll give that out one more time. 800-784-2433. That's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline.
And remember also, we were in the quandary when you haven't had any training and you are worried about someone who is saying to you there's a problem. And I mentioned, make sure the family and the physicians know. But you can call that number as well and get the information that is necessary to help yourself out and the individual out also. There are always resources.
There are.
We just have to remember where they can come from.
You'll enjoy this at COC. I'd mentioned Larry Shallert before, and when they have health fairs out there, they will give people this 800 number, and what they do is they make very good pizza there at the hospital, or at COC. I don't know if you've ever had the pizza there. It's very good. So here's what Larry does. They have a bunch of pizza there. Somebody comes up and they say, do you have this 800 number? And they say no. And they say, well, if you put this in your cell phone right now and I see you put it in there, I'll give you a slice of pizza. And so I got to tell you, most of the students on that campus have that 800 number. But it's a very
great idea.
It is.
Yes, it is.
It's a great idea. But this is a great resource, because if you're feeling down, you need somebody to talk to, call this number. And if you are talking to somebody and they say, I'm feeling like I might want to take my life, this is a great resource because you can get them on the phone right away. If you didn't have this number, there are other options. There's always 911.
That's true.
And there are other things you can do. Don't leave them, and don't agree to not tell anybody. That's just not something you can keep to yourself.
No, absolutely not.
How would you feel if they actually went forward with it and you had not said anything about it?
That's right. And, getting back to COC, they're very lucky to have Larry Shallert at COC. They
he's great.
Really are.
Great guy.
Because he used to be with Child and Family Center. Oh, what a loss.
Yeah.
What a gain.
And what a gain for COC.
And maybe
He's a
slice of
man.
pizza gain, too.
Yes.
It's a great idea.
Well, I just have to say that if you pay attention, not only to the physical health, but also the mental health, you'll be doing a great service. You really will.
That's right. And it's so important to be observant, especially around seniors as they get older. It makes a big difference. And so many people don't recognize those symptoms.
And again, we have to say that most seniors, statistics have proven this, most seniors believe that depression is something that just comes to you when you get older. They don't believe that it's anything that they can do anything about. So they just suffer with it silently, and it's needless. It's just silly.
And there could be other causes of it as well. You could have a medical ailment, you could have an infection, and maybe your medication is causing the problem. You don't know. It's not always a facet of life that is coming down on you with family and relationships and finances and all those things. There are other things that could be playing a role that could, maybe with a tweak here and a tweak there, you can alleviate the whole problem.
And it's important to know that if you're a family member or a friend, you can't just say to them, oh, come on, let's just go get a shower, take a bath, we'll go out, we'll have fun, we'll go out in the garden, we'll do something, we'll play cards, you'll feel better. It doesn't work that way. If you're clinically depressed, it's literally impossible for you to pull yourself out of it. You need help. You need the assistance of a doctor, and you may need some medication. Maybe not.
That's true. And another thing that caregivers and family members really should be aware of is if that grandparent or that senior is on various medications, they need to watch and make sure that that person takes those medications at the particular specific time, because they may be taking them more than they should.
And we also
That's
want
dangerous.
to remind them that it's not a good idea for them to self-medicate. If they're feeling down, they don't want to go get that glass of wine a couple times a day or whatever else they might be thinking about, because that's just going to give them another set of problems. That is not, you may feel good for a short amount of time, but when the effect of that alcohol or whatever you did is over with, you're going to be right back to where you were.
A temporary escape.
Yeah,
That's
don't
right.
self-medicate. That ain't going to work.
No,
But-
I know.
Well, we have a minute left. Why don't we just, again, Mike, mention that phone number again so that our listeners who were a little bit late in getting a pen and a pad of paper, you can give that number again for not just our listeners, but those caregivers who might be involved with seniors around them who might need this one.
That's right. And if you're driving your car, pull it off to the side of the road so you can write this into your device. We don't want
Absolutely.
you messing around with that while you're driving. You ready? Here we go. 1-800-784-2433.
That's great. Great number to have. Put it in your cell phones, everybody.
going to.
Let's just make sure that even if it crops up, and maybe it never crop up, but if it does, you'll be at least in the back of your mind. You'll have another option to be able to provide to your loved ones, so they can't fulfill what they're telling you what they might do.
I have a very quick question for you, Dr. Dorio, because I know we're out of time. But after I've read these humorous chart the doctors wrote out in it, is this making you be careful about what you write?
Oh, well, we dictate now, so it makes it a little easier. But you do have to go back and correct it.
There you
But
go.
I
That's
don't.
right, you
I
do
don't.
dig it.
I don't flame too much. Great, Mike. Appreciate it. Thanks for being on the show, Gun. We are sponsored by Advanced Audiology and SCV In-Home Care. Listen to us next week on the Senior Hour. Now go and enhance your quality of life.